Justice is not power. It is truth. New York at night. Neon lights flicker, casting reflections on the rain-soaked streets. In the shadows of this sleepless city, truths remain hidden, and people are judged through the lens of prejudice. Ryan Carter, a young, arrogant, and ambitious police officer, believes he alone holds the key to justice. To him, the law is a weapon, and those who break it must bow before its authority. But does he truly understand the essence of justice? Or is his own pride blinding him to the truth? One seemingly routine arrest changes everything. Jamal, a young black man, is handcuffed and taken to the station for a crime he swears he didn't commit. Ryan is certain of his decision, dismissing the protests of those around him. But when the case goes to trial, he finds himself facing Judge Marcus Williams, a powerful black man, a steadfast pillar of justice, yet a target of skeptical gazes. The courtroom battle is more than just a legal dispute. It's a war of beliefs, egos, and undeniable truths. And when Judge Williams locks eyes with Ryan and says, "Did you know your father once stood before this very court?" the entire room falls silent. A long-buried secret resurfaces, threatening to shatter everything Ryan thought he knew. Will he cling to his misguided sense of righteousness, or will he have the courage to face the truth? Join us in this gripping story where prejudice is exposed, and justice is not about power, but fairness for all. If you love thought-provoking stories, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on more compelling content. The sky over New York City was a heavy shade of gray, thick clouds pressing down on the narrow streets below. Neon lights from towering buildings reflected off puddles left behind by the rain, painting a scene that was both cold and electric with energy. Beneath the towering skyscrapers, life moved on. Workers rushed home after a long day, taxis weaved through congested traffic, and somewhere in the crowd, wary glances darted back and forth, a reminder that no matter how modern this city became, deep-seated prejudices had never truly disappeared. Amidst this urban chaos, Ryan Carter sat in his patrol car, watching the city unfold before him. A young officer, barely 2 years into the force, Ryan carried an air of confidence, perhaps arrogance, that had been ingrained in him since the start. To him, the law was the law, and enforcing it required no second thoughts. He prided himself on his ability to spot criminals on instinct, on the street experience he believed he had gained in a short time on the job. But that arrogance had started to shape him into someone he no longer recognized. He never questioned his actions, never considered the possibility that he could be wrong. To Ryan, the world was black and white. Either someone broke the law, or they didn't. There were no gray areas, no exceptions. And for certain people in the city, he had already made up his mind about them, even if he would never admit it. Not far from where Ryan sat, in a grand office within the city courthouse, Judge Marcus Williams was poring over legal documents. In stark contrast to Ryan, Marcus was a man of patience and experience. At over 50 years old, he had spent nearly 3 decades pursuing justice and standing up for what was right. But that didn't mean his journey had been easy. As a black judge in a judicial system still riddled with bias, Marcus knew he had always needed to work twice as hard to prove he deserved his seat on the bench. From the moment he entered the profession, he had faced whispers behind his back, skeptical glances from colleagues, and defendants who refused to respect his authority simply because of the color of his skin. But Marcus never let any of it shake his resolve. He had seen too much injustice, had watched too many people crushed under the weight of so-called law enforcement, and he knew he had a duty to make a difference, no matter how small. The lives of these 2 men, so different in ideology and experience, might never have crossed paths if not for the events of one fateful night. That evening, Ryan was patrolling the city's south side, a neighborhood with a high crime rate, where he had been trained to always stay on high alert. When he spotted a black car moving slowly down the street, a familiar feeling stirred inside him, suspicion. He flipped on his lights and signaled the vehicle to pull over. Behind the wheel sat a black man, well-dressed, calm. But that didn't stop Ryan. He approached the car, demanded identification, and launched into a barrage of questions. The man seemed irritated but remained composed. He asked why he had been stopped, but Ryan ignored the question, ordering him to step out of the vehicle instead. A brief argument followed. The man insisted he had done nothing wrong, that he had the right to know why he was being pulled over. But Ryan, angered by the defiance, forcibly dragged him from the car and cuffed him on the sidewalk. Bystanders stopped to watch. Some pulled out their phones to record. To Ryan, it was just another part of the job, nothing out of the ordinary. But he had no idea that his actions were about to ignite something much larger than he could have ever imagined. Within hours, footage of the arrest spread like wildfire across social media. The public reacted with outrage. Most condemned Ryan's actions, labeling them as an abuse of power driven by racial bias. News outlets picked up the story, headlines blaring across the city. The police department could no longer ignore the public outcry. The very next day, Ryan was ordered to appear in court to answer for his actions. And the judge presiding over the case? None other than Marcus Williams. The moment this information was released, the city seemed to hold its breath. This was no ordinary internal review. This was a confrontation between two men who embodied two vastly different ideologies. One who believed in the absolute, unquestionable authority of the law, and one who had spent his entire life fighting for a justice system that was fair and free from prejudice. Ryan entered the courtroom with the same confidence, arrogance, that had always defined him, convinced that he would walk away without any real consequences. But as he faced Marcus Williams, as he listened to the judge's sharp, unwavering questions, a strange feeling began to creep into his mind, one he had never entertained before. What was justice? Had he truly been enforcing the law the right way? Or had he been acting on the very biases he refused to acknowledge? This would be more than just a trial. It would be a lesson, one that neither Ryan nor Marcus would ever forget. Ryan Carter stood frozen in the middle of the courtroom, feeling like an animal backed into a corner. Never in his life had he imagined facing a judge like Marcus Williams, a man sharp as a blade, unwavering against the defiant glare Ryan gave him. In Ryan's mind, everything was still crystal clear. He had followed procedure, done his duty. So why had the entire city turned against him? Yet the anger in the crowd's eyes, the cold detachment in Marcus's gaze, made him feel like a stranger in his own world. Judge Marcus Williams, calm and authoritative, opened the case file in front of him, his eyes scanning the evidence presented. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the video of the arrest played on the large screen. Every moment unfolded with brutal clarity. Ryan demanding the black man step out of the car, the escalating tension, and finally, the forceful handcuffing on the pavement. The room fell silent, the only sound coming from the speakers, each echo of the recording landing like a hammer inside Ryan's mind. Why did you pull this man over? Marcus's voice was steady, but carried the weight of authority. Ryan clenched his fists. I was suspicious. The car was moving slowly. It looked like suspicious behavior. I had the right to investigate. Marcus raised an eyebrow, a subtle smirk playing at the corner of his lips. Suspicious? And tell me, Officer Carter, what exactly does suspicious look like to you? Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. He had no real answer, just a gut feeling. But could a police officer really rely on gut feelings alone to decide who deserved scrutiny and who didn't? Marcus gave a knowing nod, as if he had heard this reasoning countless times before. Do you even know who the man you arrested is? Ryan frowned. No, and I don't care. Marcus leaned forward slightly. That man is an attorney. No criminal record. No prior offenses. So tell me, Officer Carter, what exactly did he do to deserve being treated this way? Ryan said nothing. The tension in the courtroom thickened. Eyes bore into him, waiting for an explanation that wouldn't come. For the first time in his life, doubt crept into his mind. Not about the law, but about himself. The trial continued, evidence piling up. Marcus guided the discussion masterfully, making Ryan confront the gap between theory and reality, between the justice he believed in and the justice Marcus was fighting for. An hour later, Marcus leaned back in his chair, his gaze thoughtful. "Officer Carter, I'm not saying you're a bad person, but the system isn't always fair, and it's our responsibility to ensure that it isn't warped by unconscious bias." Ryan didn't respond. For the first time, he wasn't sure of himself. Had he truly been enforcing the law, or had he simply been a cog in a system of injustice that had existed long before him? The verdict was unexpected. Ryan wasn't fired, but he was ordered to undergo a bias awareness training program and complete 3 months of community service. A relatively light punishment, yet one that carried the weight of change. As he stepped out of the courthouse, Ryan looked up at the New York sky. The city was the same, but something inside him had shifted. The air in the courtroom was heavier than ever. For the first time in his life, Ryan Carter felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff. No longer a police officer wielding absolute authority on the streets. He was now just another man standing before justice. Judge Marcus Williams leaned back in his chair, his sharp gaze fixed on Ryan. "I've seen too many cases like this. Officers who believe they're just doing their duty. But tell me, Officer Carter, look around you. Look at the consequences." Ryan took a deep breath, but said nothing. He had never been placed under such scrutiny before. Memories of past traffic stops, past arrests, actions he had always considered routine, now weighed heavily in his mind. How many times had he been wrong, simply because he believed he was always right? Marcus continued, his voice calm but commanding. "Officer Carter, this isn't just about one case. This is about something much bigger, about trust in the system, about the responsibility that people like you carry in upholding justice rather than distorting it." Ryan looked up, locking eyes with the judge. In that moment, something within him cracked. He wasn't a bad person, but had he ever truly been a good one? Finally, Marcus delivered his ruling. "Officer Carter, I'm ordering you to complete a specialized bias awareness training program and 3 months of community service. If you truly want to continue your career, use this opportunity to reflect." Ryan clenched his fists. 3 months? To him, it felt like a humiliation. But then something stopped him. He looked around. The faces in the courtroom weren't filled with anger, but expectation. Maybe this wasn't just a punishment. Maybe it was a chance. As the trial concluded, Ryan stepped out of the courthouse, looking up at the vast New York sky. The city was the same. The crowd still rushed by. But inside him, something had shifted. Prejudice didn't just exist in society. It existed within people. And if he wanted to be a true enforcer of justice, he would have to start with himself. Taking a deep breath, Ryan Carter walked forward, beginning a new chapter, a chapter of awakening. Ryan Carter's case wasn't just another trial of a police officer accused of misconduct. It became a symbol of something larger, a battle against unconscious bias, against the abuse of power, against the injustices embedded in the system. Marcus Williams wasn't just a judge. He was a representation of those who had fought for a fair legal system. He knew that change couldn't happen overnight, but it could start with small actions, with people willing to face the truth and correct their mistakes. Ryan Carter became proof that change was possible. From an arrogant officer who believed he was always right, he was forced to confront his own faults. He learned to see the world from a different perspective, to understand that law and justice weren't always the same, and that justice wasn't just written in books, but defined by how it was enforced. This story reflects a harsh but necessary truth. The law is never perfect, and neither are the people who uphold it. But it is self-awareness, moments of reckoning, that bring us closer to true justice. Ryan took his first steps toward change. And the question left for all of us is this: do we have the courage to do the same?